I want to welcome all of our UTech staff, our university leaders, our community vendor partners, and our guests. We have 396 people registered for this event today. And we only have 220 UTech people, so we're really happy to have everyone here and joining us for this day of inspiration and hopefully aspiration for you. So today we go from UTech, University Technology, to UTech, YOU Tech. So this day is for you. This day is for you to both inspire others, be inspired, and find new aspirations. Today is a day for you to learn and grow professionally. You will hear from industry experts, and you will hear from subject matter experts. Many of you are presenting, some of you for the first time. I know this embarrasses people, but if you're presenting for the first time in any conference setting, raise your hand. That's great. This is a day that you will remember and that will really, just loft you into a different professional environment. So this is a day of growth for us. I'm so very proud of UTech and all of your work. We have 33 sessions today in all kinds of different formats. It can be from 10 minutes to an hour. And just to show each other what we're doing, what we're communicate what we're doing. We have a playroom set up for you to go in and just learn and experiment. And so it's really something I just hope that you really take advantage of everything for today. But first we need to acknowledge a few people. We want to start with our sponsors. So these companies have really made it possible for us in much of the conference to have much of the conference and the prizes. So if you're from one of these companies and you're here, please stand up as I call your company. Our-Tech is providing the photo booth. Dell has our refreshments for the day. Doble sponsored the pretty blue t-shirts that are in your bag. Thank you. Logicalis just provided this great breakfast for us. There they are all in the back. Thank you. MPI Audio Visual will have the appetizers this evening. Zoom has provided all the prize drawings, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And Promotional Solutions provided the bags and all the little goodies that are in them. Thank you. So we really owe these companies a lot just for helping us throughout the day. But we also owe a many thanks to the conference committee and the administrative team of UTech for rolling up their sleeves and giving vision to this muscle event. It was almost a year ago that I was sitting across the table from Jenny and I said, this is kind of what I want to do. I want to do this. I want to give people professional development opportunities. And she gave me this look like, seriously? She said she did not, but yes, she did. And then many times throughout the year. Are you sure you want to do it? Yes. And so, really, I got to say that there's been many people working really hard to coordinate this since last fall. And, I got to say, it's exceeded my expectations. So my little idea a year ago has turned into something really, really great. And I just want the whole team, the conference committee, the admin team who are in the room, please stand for acknowledgement. Thank you very much. So this brings me to a few hints for you today. In your conference swag bag, you'll find the program that details all the sessions and activities available for you today. It also lists all the contributors that you just clapped for. So if you see these people or you see the sponsors today throughout the day, go thank them and give them a pat on the back. We also have a game for you today. It's a passport game. And so the particulars, again, are in your program. But basically, it involves checking off activities that you attend throughout the day. There's a little bright green card in there. And then placing your card into the box of the prize that you would like to get. So Zoom has donated or sponsored, the prizes that we have. And so one of the greatest values you will find from today is the connections you make from networking. So we have multi-dimensional networking experiences for you, and several guided network exercises throughout the day. So it ranges from the little badge stickers. Did you see your little badge stickers? To face-to-face interactions, and also digital networking. So if you can go to hashtag UTech, YOUTECH 2019, and either tweet or Instagram your experiences from today. So if you complete 15 of the 20 networking challenges, you can put your passport into the box that you want to enter in by 3:30. Now, you know, those of you who know our conference committee, doesn't mean 3:31, right? It means 3:30. So the drawings will happen at the end of the day. And so, again, these great prizes were sponsored by Zoom. There's also a networking game at lunch, and lots of time in the playroom where you can interact with things like the Microsoft HoloLens. There's a 360 video demo. You can get a souvenir video or souvenir photo at the photo booth, and there's more of that in your program. So there's lots of instructions. But reminder, if you have questions or you want to interact from the audience during the day, we are recording this, and so we need for people to hear you. So you know our cute little cube microphones. Just raise your hand, we'll throw a cube to you. Hopefully you catch it, or your neighbor catches it before it smashes their face. So we will do that, and at the end of the day, we'd like to unwind a bit with some light appetizers and celebration at the Jolly. It's sponsored by MPI AV, so you'll need your conference badge for some complimentary food and beverages, including milkshakes. So now let's get to the program. So Provost Ben Vinson III is here to introduce our very special keynote speaker. Provost Vinson has been at CWRU for only a year and has been making huge strides in countless directions since arriving, including the development of Think Big, our strategic planning effort. So let's get this conference to be a manifestation of thinking big. So thanks everyone, have a great day, and welcome Provost Ben Vinson III.
It is so awesome to see so many of you from all quarters of our campus community and from people from our surrounding region here today for this conference, this event. It sounds like it's an incredibly well-planned and organized event, and I am sure that many of you will be touched, moved, and inspired by what's going to take place here today. The world around us is changing so quickly. And the way that we teach, the way that we learn, it's also changing too. Now, nowhere is that more apparent than in the realm of technology. As we approach the new academic year, I'm reminded that the students who will be soon entering our doors, they have spent nearly their entire lives immersed in technology. I know this well from my own kids who, almost from birth have been umbilically linked to an iPad or an iPhone. We recently took a trip to New Orleans, just got back. Their devices was their way to interface. And I can only imagine what their world is going to be like as they mature into this life of technology. Our students who are entering, they expect a college education that delivers a tech-rich experience. Now, all across the United States, our campus communities expect simplicity. They expect agility, clarity in their everyday technological experiences, whether that takes place in the classroom or outside of the classroom. Now, this intersection of technology and education is ever evolving, and it is you who must stand ready to take on the new challenges. And I know that you will succeed. I know this because I've seen it. This has been an incredible year where I have seen this team, UTech, rise to the call, whether it be in our new health education campus, whether it be in on-demand services for our faculty and students as they wrestle with technological challenges, or whether it be working on some new creative project in our lean Case Western Reserve way, in ways that you know well. We make it happen regardless of the resource base. We're working on that. But this is what I have seen this year, and I know that this community is ready. I've been highly impressed with the ingenuity, with the responsiveness, the skill of our UTech staff. I think today's conference is going to further showcase all of that. And for those of you, again, who are first-time presenters, again, congratulations on this moment. Very much looking forward to seeing what you have to add with your insights. Thank you, all of you, for everything you do to keep Case Western Reserve University running. Thank you for your ability to inspire those around you. Thank you for aspiring to be the best in the business of higher education. We are so lucky to have you. I've got to say, Sue has shown me time and time again, I don't think a week goes by, Sue, where in some way you're not in the news, UTech is not in the news in some way for some amazing accomplishment that this team delivers. So again, thank you. Now, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our keynote speaker. I had the pleasure of hearing him some time ago when he presented to CCAS, which is the Consortium of Colleges of Arts and Sciences, where he delivered a powerful message. I have a member of my team, Victoria Wright, who saw him, I think, last year and was dazzled and said, we have to bring this man to campus. He is going to provide us with an inspirational message. Those of you who don't know him, I think everyone by now must know him. Jaime Casap is the Chief Education Evangelist at Google. And in that capacity, he collaborates with school systems, educational organizations, leaders who are focused on building innovation into our education policies and practices. He jet sets throughout the world. He keeps his suitcase packed and ready by his side. I was asking him earlier today, does he ever sleep? Does he ever rest? Does he ever unpack? He lightly unpacks, which is what I've learned. Before he joined Google 13 years ago, Jaime spent 7 years as strategy and organization consultant at Accenture, where he worked with companies in financial services, government, utilities, healthcare, more. He serves as an advisor to dozens of organizations that are focused on skills development and the future of work. Jaime is actually a second-generation American, born of an Argentinian mother and raised in Hell's Kitchen in New York. His own experience as a child of a single mother with limited resources, this shaped his views on life. He focused on education and saw firsthand the power that combination of education and technology can have on a family. He is the co-author of a children's book called On Our Street, Our First Talk About Poverty. Now, this is a book that explores the realities of people living with inadequate resources in ways that are accessible to children and helps them understand the world around them. If anything, and as you will soon see, he is an expert communicator across the spectrum, all ages, from infants to those in their 90s. It's amazing. He also teaches, Jaime also teaches a 10th grade communications class at the Phoenix Coding Academy, and he's also an adjunct professor at Arizona State University, where he teaches classes on policy, innovation, and leadership. A prolific public speaker, Jaime speaks on education, digitalization, and innovation, Generation Z, and the future of work at events around the world. Now, all of you, you can follow him on Twitter at jcasap and watch his YouTube career advice videos at youtube.com/Jaime Casap. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please help me welcome Jaime Casap. Thanks, Jaime. Appreciate it.
Here, love being in Cleveland, mostly because I've been spending the last month and a half. I live in Phoenix, but I've been spending the last month and a half in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's at 6,800 feet. And for the month and a half that I've been there, we spent about a week in Greer, which is about 9,000 feet. And then the first trip that I took was to Breckenridge, Colorado, which is like 11,000 feet. And being at like sea level, you guys, you know what level you're at? Like, I know what level you're at. You're at 354, I think. Because I'm at sea level, I feel like I could have run to the hotel from the airport last night. It's been amazing to actually have my lungs back, so I'm excited to be here. I'm going back to Flagstaff. I'm going to Iowa today and then back to Flagstaff tomorrow for another week. But anyway, excited to be here. Let me introduce myself a little bit. I am the education evangelist at Google. I've been at Google for the past 13 years. My career at Google started in the education space when I launched what we used to call Google Apps for Education into the university space. That's me and the CIO at Arizona State University, Adrian Sainer, when we launched Google Apps for Education back in 2006, when I had a lot less gray hair. Launched Google Apps for Education into the university space, launched Google Apps into K-12, and then I had this crazy idea of launching this device called a Chromebook into education. So my job at Google is to work across all the different teams that are doing things in education and be a subject matter expert. And that's the reason I'm here. Sue connected with our Google folks, and the Google folks asked me to come here. So that's what I do. I work across all the different teams that are doing things in the education space to provide them feedback and insight. Now, besides my role at Google, I get to travel around the world. She was like, "Why do you want your badge?" I'm like, "Because I collect them. I collect all badges from places that I visit around the world. I get to talk about the future of work, innovation, creativity, all those different things. Besides that, I helped start a school where I live in Phoenix, Arizona, called the Phoenix Coding Academy. And this is not a charter school, it's not a private school, it's a regular high school inside the Phoenix Union School District, where we took computer science and embedded it into all the subjects that kids are learning. So kids are learning computer science and art at the same time, and computer science and history at the same time, in a cross-disciplinary way. And we're doing crazy things like kids aren't getting grades in the school, kids don't have homework at the school, right? They're project-based. As a matter of fact, we're trying to get rid of grade levels. We're 3 years into this, we got one more year, and we'll finally have our first graduating class. And at that point, we want to start introducing the concept of competency-based learning, where kids are coming into the school in 9th grade and then fitting them on teams as opposed to grade levels, right? So we're doing different things there. Besides being one of the founders of the school, I also teach in that class. I teach 10th grade communication skills, which is one of the most important things. I know some of you are presenting for the first time. I think it's the most important skill you can focus on, because in a world where information is coming at us at the speed it's coming at us at, we have to be able to present that information in creative ways, and storytelling is part of that. So I go in and work with the students. And for anyone ever teach 10th grade before? Yeah, that's why you don't do it anymore. They are the hardest group to. 10th grade is the 16-year-olds, right? They're the I know how the world works, thank you very much generation, right? They know how things work. Anyways, I go in and work with those students, but the thing that I'm the most passionate about right now is I want to be a YouTube star. So I launched a YouTube channel. That was funny? That wasn't funny? I wanted to I launched a YouTube channel a couple of months ago, focused on career advice for young people, career advice for old people, focused on education, things about new concepts of learning, those types of things. Actually, the video I'm editing right now, which will be released today as soon as I can get to some high-speed internet access, is around meetings. How many of you go to meetings? Right? Yeah. Do you know that we have 25 million meetings a day in this country? 25 million meetings, and all of you are like, "Yep, I know. I go to half of those." Right? And so I did this whole video on what meetings are supposed to be like and how to make meetings more effective, and I broke the technology. Okay, so you should go subscribe. Make sure you watch some of those videos, share those. It's been a lot of fun work to do those things. But I want to talk about the importance of education and why we get together at events like this, to talk about how we get better at what we do, because to me, education is the most important thing that we can focus on, because I believe education disrupts poverty. I believe education changes families' destinies. And I believe this because I'm actually not a second-generation American. I'm a first-generation American. I was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. My mother came from Argentina, escaping poverty, government oppression, and I was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Any New Yorkers in the room? Yeah, you're usually louder and more annoying than that. Yeah. But I'm not talking about the Hell's Kitchen today. I'm talking about the Hell's Kitchen from the 70s and 80s, when it wasn't a great place to be. When you showed up at the airport and you got that brochure there in the middle about welcome to Fear City and where you can and can't go in New York at that time. New York was a terrible place. Remember the movie Escape from New York? Have you seen that movie? Yeah, I thought that was a documentary. Like, yeah, that's what New York looks like. That's what it felt like to me. And I didn't want anything to do with that world, so I was able to graduate high school, I went to college, I went to graduate school, and I've had a pretty amazing career and life since then, since graduating from graduate school. Everything from flying in an F-16 to, hiking up mountains in Africa with gorillas to speaking in front of the president and the first lady at the White House 4 years ago yesterday to talk to students about the importance of education. I've had a pretty amazing career. And that is all due to education. This is why my focus is on education. Now, I'm showing off a little bit with this slide, but I'm also pointing out that that's what education does. That you can take any student that you have in your school, any student that you have in either high school or in college, and they can do the same thing, right? That's the power that education has. But here's the thing we don't think about. That the impact that we have on our students goes on for generations and generations and generations. And I know this is true now because I have my own kids. And this is them. No, don't awe them. No, no. My 4-year-old called me an asshole 6 months ago. Do not awe them. I have a 26-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 4-year-old. Some of you are realizing I can only handle one child at a time. That's true. And my 26-year-old is actually living in New York, living in Hell's Kitchen, living a block from where I grew up, she's been there for 2 years, loves living her dream life. Living in New York, has an apartment, she's a video producer, she works at CNN, she makes fake news, and she does it well too. And she loves what she's doing. She graduated from college 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, and we never had a conversation about her going to college. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college and her mother went to college and people in her life and her circle went to college. She actually assumed she was going to go to graduate school her whole life because I went to graduate school and her mother is a teacher and she also went to graduate school. And she assumed I was going to pay for it, but we took care of that pretty quickly. My 18-year-old I was telling Sue, my 18-year-old is starting in 2 weeks at Arizona State University, and we never had a conversation about whether he should go to college or not. It was just a question of higher education. They understand the importance of education because of the environment that they grew up in. That's the impact that we have, that it goes on for generations and generations and generations. And so what we need to understand is how do we, whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a professor, whether you're an administrator, whether you're a support person, whatever it is, how do we collectively prepare kids for the future? That's what we do in education. We prepare them for the future that they face. The problem is that the future has been changing dramatically over the last couple of years. We are obviously no longer living in a space where where 95, 97% of Americans were farming at some point. We moved from that to building things and manufacturing things, and even manufacturing jobs today require higher level skill than even in the past. And then we moved from this to what we used to call knowledge workers or white collar workers. Remember the term white collar workers? It comes from this idea that people would get educated, have a higher education, and go and work and do this kind of work. Even this is starting to fade because we now live in what I call the digitalization economy. And by digitalization, I mean everything. I mean computer science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, AR, VR, automation, robotics, the whole thing. I get to travel around the world, and I can tell you that every organization, every business, every government across the world is trying to figure out what they're going to do with digitalization. And the language for digitalization is computer science. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to go out and become a computer scientist, although in a minute I'll tell you why they should. I believe that computer science is a language that everyone needs to understand because it's the baseline for all these things that we're talking about. In the same way that we needed to understand English to survive in the working world, it didn't matter, just because you studied English did not mean that you were going to go be a novelist. just because you understand computer science and the concepts and how it works does not mean you're going to go be a computer scientist. It means that everything is tied to these ones and these zeros. Now, I joked about how not everyone needs to be a computer scientist. We actually need a lot of computer scientists. And I actually wrote down these numbers here for you guys here in Cleveland, or in Ohio. I had the number somewhere. I lost them. But there's a percentage of young people who are not studying computer science as a concept in schools. And to me, that doesn't sound like that's the right focus, right? So for example, the average computer science graduate in Ohio makes $83,000 a year versus the average salary of like $46,000 a year. And part of the problem that we're finding in K-12, this isn't even at the higher education level, is that schools aren't offering this as an option for students. There are something like 22% of schools in Ohio offer computer science out of all the schools that offer AP programs. And there's nothing wrong with AP history, right? My dream job is to be the AP history teacher and basketball coach at a high school. That's all I'm working towards. This whole career is about that. But we have to understand the importance of computer science in the same way that we understand the importance of history, because digitalization is here to stay. And the reason I know that is because if you think about technology at the most basic level, it's become entrenched in everything that we do. It's core to everything that we do. For example, how many of you have not used technology today? Yeah, a couple of months ago, I asked that question in the crowd, and a woman in the front row raised her hand. And obviously I was surprised because very few people raise their hand when you ask them. It's really a trick question, because if you drove here, you use technology, but we'll talk about that later. And she raised her hand, and I looked because it caught my eye. So I looked down, she was in the front row, and I looked down, her hand is up here, and her phone is in her other hand. I don't think she understood the question. But how long did it take us to get to this point? To this point where you have in your head, whether you realize it or not, a calculation of how far you will drive back to get your phone if you left it at home, right? It's gone from like a mile to like 10 miles, right? Like it's how far, like how empty you feel if you don't have your technology with you. And think about how long it took us to get to this point. For example, how many of you have iPhones? Oh man, I hate to see that. Okay. Okay, that's fine. The iPhone is 11 years old. Think about that. It's not that old. Do you remember we used to have to call the internet? Like, place a phone call to the internet with our home phones, and the internet would be busy? Or it would just hang up on you, and it was... And what was your reward when you got online? It was a bunch of web pages that had links to other web pages that had links. And that was the most exciting thing you'd ever seen in your life. And then everyone started posting pictures on those sites. And you're like, everyone, come here, there's going to be a picture of my screen. And that line on the bottom would just go back and forth. You're like, all right, come back in half an hour, there'll be a picture on my screen. And today, what's your expectation with technology? Right? I found myself this year, I stopped using Wi-Fi on airplanes because flying and traveling is stressful enough. I found myself extra stressed and extra frustrated when I would do something and then go on a web page and it wouldn't load fast enough for me while I'm flying through space. Think about that idea, right? Like I'm flying through space and my YouTube videos don't work. I don't understand. And if that's true for us, the majority of the people in this room who are minding our own business, when this thing called the internet showed up, what do you think that means for a generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before Google? Literally don't know what the world looked like before smartphones and tablets and devices, who don't know what the world looked like before Wi-Fi. Do you remember the world before Wi-Fi everywhere? Like, if you want to have fun, tell a 12-year-old kid that you're going to go spend some time and the place you're going to doesn't have Wi-Fi, and watch their reaction. They're just like, I don't understand. Like, are we going to a cave? Where are we going? This is truly the first digital generation. And there's two things that I want to point out about this generation. Number one is that just because they're born with technology doesn't mean they know how to use these tools. And we've given them a pass. We say to them, you're just born with technology. You just naturally know how to use technology because when you were born, there was just technology around. Here's the technology, go, be free. Think about another time. I was trying to think about like an analogy to that and a story that would relate to that from my generation. It would be like you guys were all brought home from the hospital in cars, right? For the majority. I mean, you can't say that in Montana, but for the most part here, most people were brought home from the hospital in a car. You grew up in a car, you're sat in the back seat, face one way, then face the other way, and then you graduated up to the front seat. And when you were 16, did any one of your parents say, look, when you were born, there were just cars. You grew up around cars. Here's a car. No, we taught them, they taught you how to use a car. You took lessons, you studied how to use the car. You actually learned the rules of the road, and then you learned the culture of the road. And you did that over time. And then when you guys took off for the first time, your parents freaked out, just like I'm sure some of you freaked out. And you worried and like finally let someone get on a highway and you freaked out about them being on the highway. We paid attention to that, but for some reason with technology, we just assume that they know how to use these tools. We call them digital natives. We call them digital citizens. And the evidence shows us that they don't know how to use these tools. 80% of elementary school kids can't tell you the difference between a sponsored website and a real news site. 80% of this one study where high school kids could not find a result to a search if it didn't show up on the first page of a Google search result. By the time they get to you, they're not able to use these tools. We have to help them use these tools, because the second thing I want to talk about this generation is that they actually think about learning in a different way because of the world that they were born into. They think about learning in a completely different way than how we think about learning because of the way they were born and what they were born into. This is a picture of my 18-year-old when he was like 13, and he comes into my office with his laptop and a bunch of code. And he's got a bug. He can't fix it. He wants my help. And I made him take a step back so I could take this picture, not to embarrass him that he couldn't code, but to point out, because it hit me, that he was learning how to code on his own. He was teaching himself how to code. And now he's designing games and he's doing all these things, but he's learned how to do these things on his own. We waited for people to teach us. We waited to take a class. I remember starting my first job. I worked for Governor Cuomo, and I was working in a Latino community in Albany, and I needed to be able to write better in Spanish, and I needed to take a class. The only option I had was to take a community class on a Monday night for 16 weeks to take Spanish. And to be honest with you, I didn't learn how to write any better, and I slept for about 2/3 of that class every Monday night. I was tired. This generation has a whole different avenue of learning for them. Imagine they knew how to use these tools. Imagine we can help them learn how to use these tools. What is it that they can learn given the fact that this generation is facing something completely different? Now, we also have to think about not only are they different because of technology. That's where we tend to focus when it comes to this generation, but there's lots of factors that have impacted who this generation is. For example, I call them the Great Recession generation. This is a generation that is worried about work. We grew up with this idea that all you got to do is work hard, show up to work early, leave late, and you move up through a company. You move up through an organization. You're done, and then you get your pension or your retirement, and you get a watch, and everything's glorious. This generation watched their parents do that and then lose their jobs. This generation, we grew up with this idea that all you got to do is go to college and get a piece of paper. Doesn't matter what you get it in. Get it in basket weaving. Just get that piece of paper. This generation watched their brothers and sisters do that and then come home with $100,000 in debt and not be able to find a job. Do you think it's any wonder that majority of them are worried about work, even though things are better today, but that's just been a couple of years when you think about what this generation has faced for the last 15, 16 years. I talked to a lot of Chamber of Commerce audiences, and the basic concept from this group is like, this is what we need from the workforce. And what I try to tell them is that 70% of this generation doesn't want to work for you at all. They want to do their own thing. Now, that's a concept or an idea that might not have been viable for me when I was a kid, because if I wanted to start my own business, I needed a storefront, I needed an inventory, I needed supplies, I needed a cabinet, I needed capital, I needed a cash register, I needed to find things to put in my store that applied to everyone in my community. Today, any kid with a laptop can start a job, can start a business. I'm fascinated by flat earthers. Hopefully there's nobody in the room, so I won't offend you, but I'm fascinated by flat earthers. I can start a flat earth t-shirt company today and make $75,000 a year selling flat earth t-shirts. There's more out there than you think. This generation doesn't look at work in the same way we looked at work. Even if they find work, they want to have meaningful jobs. They want to have an impact because they know the secret's out. 70% of Americans are disengaged with the work that they do, and they want nothing to do with that. So they think about work in a different way. I also call them the 9/11 generation. This is a generation that does not know what the world looked like before 9/11. I remember the first time I saw my kid with a history book, and there was a page on 9/11. I'm like, that's not history. That just happened like, oh wait, that happened like 10 years ago. Like you realize that this generation doesn't know what the world looked like before 9/11. They're growing up with this concept of global terrorism, national terrorism. They're growing up with this idea of gun violence in college, in high school, in elementary school, in bars, and concerts. They're growing up doing live shooter drills since they were 5 years old. Even me, who thinks about this and has studied this generation for the last couple of years, my son, just a couple months ago when he was going to prom, he was trying to decide whether he was going to go to prom or not. Him and his girlfriend broke up. It's a long story. If you want to hear it, I'll tell you, but and he didn't want to go, and we're sitting there saying, no, just go for it. Just show up. You just want to show up, spend 15, it sounds like solid advice, right? Just show up, spend 15 minutes, and then at least you can say you went to prom. And he said, I can't do that. If I go to prom, I have to stay at prom for 3 hours because they shut the doors. This is a generation that's growing up worried about the world. This is a generation that's growing up with the concept of climate change as a reality. 90% of this generation believes in climate change, and the majority of them believe that humans have caused climate change. And 80% of them don't understand why it's not our number one priority. How is it that you can talk about anything else when the house is on fire? So this generation thinks about problems in a different way. They've kind of given up on the fact that they think that we can solve these problems. Here's the good news. They believe that they can do something about these problems. And you're starting to see this with folks like Gretchen here, who was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for her work on climate change, and she's 16 years old. And if you think about this, if she wins the Nobel Peace Prize, that'll be 2 teenagers that have won the Nobel Peace Prize in the last 5 years. This generation thinks about problems in a different way. The good news for all of us in the room is that they also believe in higher education. 85% of them believe higher education is important to their success. They believe in higher education. That's the good news. The bad news is they're not necessarily bought into the model that we're selling them. They're not bought into this idea of like, oh, it has to be done this way. 75% of them believe that they can get an education in lots of different ways. And that stigma of online education for this generation is gone. The idea that an online education is not the same as a regular education is insane to them. But they believe in higher education. They just want a different model. They might not have bought into all the things that we sell them in higher education. That's not so much here, but we pitched them the student union, and we pitched them the sports teams, and we pitched them the dorm life. And they're like, no, we just want the content and the professors, thank you. So they think about higher education from a different point of view. The good news is, again, is that, and we need to stick to this, we need to hold on to this, which is they believe higher education is important in their life. They want higher education beyond what they get in high school, but they want it in a different way. For example, they want to make sure that they're getting the experiences. When I was in college, my college didn't trust me to do an internship till I was a junior or a senior, right? These kids want to do internships as soon as they get there. They want that to be part of their experience. 85% of them want to be able to take business classes, especially for non-business majors, because of the entrepreneurship concepts that they believe in. This idea of experience for us is different than what this generation is going through, right? So, especially in college, you go for a semester or two in college, and then you go home for summer break, and you do summer jobs, right? You make pizza, you work at the burger joint. You need that kind of experience. And I got these numbers I got down. I wrote these down because I haven't memorized these numbers here yet. But this shocked me. 22% of 13 to 21-year-olds make money online. 16% of them work for themselves. And 9% of them make a full-time living online. This generation wants experiences. So if they're showing up here and you're like, just wait till you're a junior to do an internship, you probably have lost them right from the beginning. Now, I remember 10 years ago talking to CIOs at universities, and the CIOs would say to me, technology is not a differentiator in where a kid's going to go to college, decide to go to college. That is no longer true. Not only do they expect cutting-edge technology in higher education, they expected and judge you as a business depending on what your technology looks like in your business. This generation, 90% of them expect cutting-edge technology where they work. They go in for an interview and they see the technology that you're using, and they judge you based on what technology you're using. They expect the ability to have cutting-edge technology constantly getting better. I mean, think about it. This is a generation that every year there's a new phone, right? And this idea that they would hold on to a phone for like 3 years is just insane to them. Even though we make them do that because we're not going to buy them a new phone every year. But if it was up to them, they would. So they think about technology from a different point of view. And it's important to realize why. Why do they have these expectations? Well, they have these expectations because they're facing a different world. They're not facing the same world that we face. Most of us can look at a picture like this, and we can kind of look at this and still remember what humans look like when humans made cars. Think about an 18-year-old looking at this picture and has no concept that at some point in history, humans did this. Robots have always done this to them. And not only that, those of us that are watching those machines make machines, and we watch those assembly lines come online and replace workers, now those robots, they're coming off the assembly line and they're walking around. And I get to judge people's work as I travel around the world as, is that a human's job or is that a robot's job? And how long before it's a robot's job? Because these robots are doing things now like building walls. A couple months ago, we had a group of people come out and help fix one of our walls in our backyard. And the whole time I'm thinking, that's 12 people out there working. How long is it before a machine comes out and does that? And those of us think that, space like retail is somewhere that, there's a lot of human interaction. But no, it's robots that are packing up your Dove soap and your hammer and whatever else that you order from your Amazon Prime. And this is happening in other industries as well. 4.5 million people in this country make a living driving things. Someone drove me to the airport. Someone drove me on a plane because they're driving the plane. Someone is going to drive me back to the airport. 4.5 million people in this country make a living driving things. Driving supplies, driving people, driving equipment. And you can go buy a self-driving car today. Today, you can go to Walmart and buy a self-driving. No, not yet. One day, Walmart will sell self-driving cars. You can buy a self-driving car today. What is that technology going to look like in 5 years, in 10 years? And we're starting to see this inch its way into other spaces as well. This is a very traditional picture. Everyone in this room recognizes this picture, a picture of a supermarket. And I ask, what are the workers in this supermarket doing? What's the work that they're doing? And they're doing process work. They're taking your cans, scanning them, putting them in a bag for you, and then watching you use the keypad. This job that used to be a very complicated job, used to be the front line to fraud, used to be the front line to being able to make change and count things and do lots of things and be the face of the organization. This job is so easy today, you can do it. Because what do you find in supermarkets today? Self-service checkout. Anyone take a training class on how to do self-service checkout? I wish some of you would take a class. It's the barcode, just in case no one told you. It's not the top, not the bottom, it's the barcode. But I have confidence that you can do this job because this is the job that my 4-year-old does. This is her job. Never taken a training class, can do this job pretty easy. What's next? Because self-service checkout's not where we're going to stop. And that's the problem with change, is that change happens gradually and then suddenly. And we now live in suddenly times. Because Amazon's saying, well, why do people need to check anything out at all? Why can't you just check yourself into a store, grab whatever you want off the shelves, put them in a bag, and just walk out of the store? So we have to look at this industry and think about it from a new perspective. For example, how many of you like going grocery shopping? Like going to the store? Weirdo, 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 weirdo. I'm just trying to point out the weirdos in the room. Thanks for keeping your hand up, weirdo. I hate grocery shopping. The worst thing that my wife can say to me is not, that's it, I'm done. I'm taking a kid and I'm going to my sister's, even though she doesn't have a sister. The worst thing that my wife can say to me is, hey, can you stop by the store and pick up X? For a split second, I'm thinking, if I just divorce her right now, I don't have to do that. Like, just a split second. I hate grocery shopping. It's a terrible human experience. You've been buying the same 20 crappy things that every week that you've been buying for 20 years. If you're a single man, you buy the same 10 cans of soup. It's just a terrible experience. But now imagine I'm a supermarket owner. And I don't have to hire 20 process workers, because now when you come to my supermarket, you just check yourself in, and I don't have to worry about someone checking you out. I don't have to worry about people bagging up your stuff because you're going to be doing it yourself. Now I can hire different workers. Now I can hire dietitians, nutritionists, food experts, cooks. So when you come to my grocery store, when you walk in, someone might greet you and say, what's your nutrition strategy this week? What's your diet plan? What are you trying to make? Oh, you don't know how to make those 2 things? Come over here, walk over to my demo station. I'll show you how to make those things. Oh, you've never used that before? You've never made that? Come here, let's walk through that. I'll show you what you need to do that. I can give you an experience. And that's where the differentiator is between some of the world thinking that automation and robotics are coming to steal our jobs versus what I think is going to happen, which is jobs are going to constantly shift and change. And that it's not so much that these 20 jobs are going away, it's that we're going to need higher level of skill to do jobs that machines are now, to do jobs that machines can't do today, the human jobs. And so it's important that we focus on the skills that this generation needs, because this is happening across the board. All jobs are being impacted by automation and robotics. It doesn't matter where you're in. And by the way, this is not just for low-level jobs. It's not for low-income jobs. It's across the board. And when I was doing my research on this topic, I realized that automation and robotics were part of my career 25 years ago when I started working. The first time I showed up to work, there was an automation tool on my desk 25 years ago. There was this machine that can do this crazy thing called send emails, dummy terminal sitting there. And if I wanted to write a letter to someone, I could sit there myself, type it up, and just hit this button called send, and it would send this message to someone. When just a couple of years before that, if I wanted to send someone a message, a letter, I'd have to write it on a piece of paper, hand it to a typing pool. Do you remember, anyone old like me remember typing pools? There'd be 4 or 5 people sitting in a circle, and you'd hand them a piece of paper, and they would put it on a pile, type it up, bring it back to you, edit, you go back and forth through the typewriter, you do this, and then they'd put it in the envelope and mail it. And now, I can send this message instantly. Automation's been part of our lives for a long time. It's just happening faster now. And so that's why we need to think about the skills that this generation needs and how do we adapt to them. What is it that we need to do to make sure that we're adapting to them? So for example, like helping them build the skills that they need. Problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, the ability to learn, and creativity. There's some version of this that nobody in this room is surprised by these things. These are the we've been talking about these things for so long, we call them 21st century skills, right? How many times you've heard that phrase, 21st century skills? We're 20 years into the 21st century. My kid's going to be around in the 22nd century. I can't wait till I start seeing that. Well, our kids need 22nd century skills. That's coming. We've been talking about this list for so long that we think we know how to help them build these skills. But we're not considering this future. And now that we have a clear definition of what it's going to look like, we have to ask new questions. We have to look at this from a different point of view. And I want to give you a couple of examples. For example, we're still asking kids today, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? All of you are guilty of that. I know you are because I talk to lots of students. College, high school, elementary. Every kid, there's never been a kid when I ask them, how many of you have been asked what you want to be when you grow up, that every single hand goes up. Usually with eyeball roll, they roll their eyeballs when they tell you this. We have to stop asking them that question. That question doesn't make sense anymore. That question made sense when I was a kid, when you were a kid, when we had 100 jobs, when jobs were stable, when jobs didn't shift that much. Today, I'm working for a company that didn't exist 20 years ago. And now is a dominating player in the world. What companies are going to exist in the next 20 years that we don't even have names for yet? 65% of the jobs of the future don't exist today. Jobs are constantly shifting and changing. It's the wrong question. What do you want to be when you grow up is the wrong question. The better question, the question that I ask students is, what problem do you want to solve? What's the problem that spins in your head? And the second question, just as important as the first question, is how do you want to solve that problem? And then you guys come in here, which is the third question, which is what do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities you need to have to solve that problem? And the problem doesn't have to be like a global problem. It doesn't have to be solving world hunger. It could be how to make better remote controls. how to make better clocks. It doesn't matter how to make cars go faster, how to sell better coffee makers. It doesn't matter what the problem is. It's the concept of problem solving. It's the idea of problem solving that our students go through. They think about problems in a different way. And we have to help them think through those problems. By the way, this is closer to what Daniel Pink talked about in his book Drive. Did you ever read the book Drive? He talks about the 3 things that motivate all human beings. It's the same 3 things: purpose, autonomy, and mastery. What problem do you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? And what do you need to learn to solve that problem? This is a picture of our Google Science Fair winners from a couple years ago, and Ann there in the middle was one of my favorite contestants because she was described by my own marketing team as not your typical science student. And I found that phrase to be fascinating because I actually think the opposite is true. I think that this is the future science student because she had a problem that she wanted to solve. She had a friend who lived in the Philippines who didn't have electricity, and this upset her. So she went, her science project was, she went and invented a flashlight that's powered by the heat of the human hand. And she was 15 years old when she did this. I can give you 1,000 examples of 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds building things and creating things, and we are doing nothing but getting in their way. This is a generation of problem solvers. So that's one. 2 is this idea of making sure that we're helping kids. It is no longer about putting information in kids' heads, but instead of helping kids take all that information and building intelligence out of it. How do we help kids develop the concepts and the ideas that they need to take all the world's information that's coming at them and make sense of it? Data analytics, data mining, data understanding, data mapping, all the things that go around intelligence. How do we help kids build intelligence? And then making sure that we're providing them collaborative opportunities to work together. You know, education today is this idea that you sit in a classroom and you do this and you're by yourself, when in reality, it's a collaborative world that we live in. How do we help build collaborative models so our students can do things? Imagine you are, I don't know if any of you are actual professors, but imagine you are a first year, a freshman professor, and you give out a test. The test that we know doesn't really do anything, doesn't measure anything, doesn't show success. As a matter of fact, if you don't believe me, go take the SAT and see how you do. But imagine you're handing out one of those tests, and at the end of one of those tests, 2 kids come up to you at the front and they say, "We were sitting back there, and I noticed that there were some answers that I knew, and then there were some answers that she knew, so we decided to combine our skill set and work on this together." What would your reaction be? Why are we teaching kids that collaborating is cheating? Why are we teaching kids that finding people who are smarter than us is cheating, when that's all I do is find people who are smarter than me? I cheat off of people all the time. How do we build collaborative models where kids are building things together, working on things together, and doing things? And by the way, this has been true in higher education for a long time. In the 1920s, the majority of scientific papers were written by one person. By the 1940s, it was by 5 people. Today, you can find 8 to 10 people collaborating on papers and research and doing things together. You guys have the model to do this. How do we help students provide collaborative action where they're building things and doing things together? We have to help them understand that learning is not static. I remember, I'll admit this in front of you guys, I remember when I was done with graduate school. I remember sitting there, typing up my last 60-page paper, sitting there and hit end or save on my WordPerfect 5.1. Remember WordPerfect 5.1? You guys still have that in your lab? I hope you do, and I hit print, and I sent it to the dot matrix printer, and I had a good half hour to kill, right? And I was sitting there thinking, I am done. I am done learning. I never have to learn again. Because I was under the belief that education was a process. Education was something that happened to me, something that I went through. I am being educated. I am an educator. We think about education as a process, but in reality, education is a mindset. It's this idea of constant lifelong learning, and we have to meet students where they are. There's changing demographics in education. I'll tell you the story of a Latina girl, high school girl from a couple years ago in Phoenix when she got into a prestigious school. I won't talk about which school, but she got into a prestigious school, went to her father and said, hey, I got into this school. I'm going to the school. And her father's like, no, you're not. You're staying here and taking care of your brothers and sisters. So in the Latino culture, where today 1 in 4 kids is Latino, and we're counting states like Nebraska, in some areas it's 100% Latino. How do we talk about higher education for a generation whose parents believe that you should be close to home? What's that going to look like? And tie that into this idea of lifelong learning. We're constantly learning and building things. And I was talking to Sue about this morning. A couple of months ago, actually not months, a couple years ago, I'm having dinner with Michael Crow, the president at ASU, and I said to him, why did you abandon my daughter? And he's like, what are you talking about? I've known him for years, so I can talk to him that way. Don't talk to him that way. And I said, she graduated from ASU. At that point, it was 2 years ago, and she hasn't heard from you since. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, don't get me wrong. She gets the Alumni Association emails and the $50 discount for the lifelong membership. She gets those emails. But why isn't she getting an email that says, hey, Lane, what are you doing today? And through the technology that we have today, why isn't she, when she responds, you're living in New York and working at CNN. Well, I just scanned your transcript, and you took a lot of video production classes, but there's been a lot of updates to those video production classes. Would you like to take a refresher course? Oh, you're working at CNN. I scanned your transcript, and you didn't take a journalism class. Would you like to take a journalism class? And by the way, there's 10 other people in the New York area who are also interested in taking a journalism class. Would you like to form a learning community, and we'll find you a facilitator? We can do that today, right now. And so I said to him, as I say to you guys, why isn't all your students for the rest of their lives not going to your .edu for whatever they want to learn forever? This idea of lifelong learning models, and how do we create that? So I'll leave you with this last thought. We're not behind. We're exactly where we need to be. Technology is a new thing. It's finally useful. In 1995, 1% of the world was online. Please tell me that 1995 was not that long ago. No, it wasn't a long time ago. It was just like yesterday. Today, it's only 50%. And that number is kind of soft. I've been to a lot of these countries that say they have internet access. They don't have internet access. It's probably closer to 35%. But let's say 50%. That means that only half the world is online right now. We're at the beginning of this. We are exactly where we need to be. We just need to start taking action now. And we've been here before with another technology called electricity. Thomas Edison had his plant up and running in the late 1800s, and he was going around, like I am, trying to convince businesses to use his new technology called electricity. And business leaders back then were saying, no, that's not going to work. He was able to convince 4% of the businesses to use electricity, and 10 years later, those businesses were not getting good results. So think about that. The business leaders solidified their position. They're like, no, see, that electricity thing, that's a fad. It wasn't until business leaders changed their models, until they did things differently, until they changed what they were doing, where they can take advantage of electricity, that you started seeing real change happen, that you started seeing benefits. And if all we do is take technology and put it on top of our current education model, then all we're doing is making the old model maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit more efficient. What we need to do is take the best ideas that we have about what good learning looks like and then ask ourselves, how do we use digitalization? How do we use the tools that we have to bring these ideas to life? Because it's not the invention or the technology that changes the world. It's the willingness of those using the old technology to switch what they're doing to take advantage of that technology. And so I'll leave you with this closing thought, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. And there's my contact information. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter, whatever you want to do, reach out. I'm also a photographer. I take lots of pictures on Instagram. But I want you to think about this. I want you to think about when I asked you how many of you have not used technology today, whatever technology you thought about, whether it's your iPhone. Okay, fine, you got iPhones. Whether it's your MacBook, your iPad extra large. We got lots of people dying at the Grand Canyon, and I swear I think it's the iPad. I think people are walking around like this, and then they just fall off. What, your Chromebook, your MacBook, your Surface tablet, whatever it is. For me, it's a Pixel 3 XL. Anyone have one of these? One person? Yeah, all right, we got some fans. The most innovative technology in the world. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so I want you to think about this latest and greatest technology, that's a couple months old, this technology that's more powerful than Ronald Reagan had in its entire industry, in its entire technology for the United States in 1980. This device here, this powerful device. I want you to think about this. And then I want you to think about my 4-year-old, or your 4-year-old, or a 5-year-old, or some little kid like this. And then I want you to realize that this is the worst technology my kid will ever see in her life. This is like her Commodore 64. Because in 20 years, she's going to be a teacher, she's going to have a young class, and in 20 years, she's going to find this in the 50-cent box at a thrift store. There's going to be thousands of them. And she's going to grab it, and she's going to say to those young kids, oh, I got to get this one. My dad had one of these. Because she's going to want to put on her shelf like a museum piece. The way some of you guys have old technology sitting on your shelves. You can go to one of your offices, I bet you got old technology that's 20 years old sitting on your shelf. And she's going to look at it and she's going to say, oh, you guys, look, there's the port. And her young kids are going to be like, what's that for? And she's going to pause for a second because she's going to sound crazy. And she's going to say, okay, look, this is going to be unbelievable, but I swear there's YouTube videos about this. With that thing right there, my dad had to plug this into the wall. And those kids were like, what, like take it out, activate the nuclear cell? No. He had to plug this into the wall every day. For hours, this thing was plugged into the wall. And those young kids are going to look at her with a little bit of disbelief and, let's be honest, a little bit of disgust and be like, my God, how did those poor people live like that? Those are the kids that, in just a couple of years, are going to be in front of you. What are we doing in education to prepare the right channels and the right processes and the right learning models to help them develop the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that they're going to need to solve the problems that they're going to be passionate about? That's why I hope we gather at events like this to talk about those issues. Thank you guys very much. Questions? And you say I'm supposed to kick this out into the audience? No. All right, don't kick it. Please don't ask questions in the back. My arm's gonna come off. I bounced it to her, okay? I could reach if I wanted to.
So you can actually get an assist from somebody else in the audience, and
okay.
That's how we use it in the classroom. Amy Wilson Delphos, thank you for a really inspiring plenary and reminding us how much left we still have to do in education. So I'm from the School of Medicine, and the physicians were up on the left-hand side of your interesting graph there. I've been trying to figure out what is the most important skill that we're going to teach these Generation Z medical students that I'm convinced we're starting to get. Mm-hmm. Because about 3 years ago, I started saying to my colleagues, we're disconnected from our students. We're starting to miss the mark with them.
Right.
So in my mind, the most important thing we need to teach them is something around critical appraisal. So all the information they're taking in,
Right.
what do they do with that? But I'm looking to you for any advice specifically about how to do that.
Right.
How can we connect with them in terms of critical thinking, critical appraisal?
Yeah, that's a great question. And also, I worry about that chart a little bit sometimes because you see that the medical profession up there in the corner, and I think that's now, but I don't know how long that is for. Because to be honest with you, would I rather have a very precise mechanical robot, do something to my eye, or some guy named Johnny? Like, I don't know. I think we're getting to that time and space where it's going to be a combination of both. It's this idea that what we need to do is figure out how to help them develop those human skills. And so I think the most important thing that we can do with critical thinking is provide them the opportunity to show us how they critically think. So for example, and this is not even closely the same thing, but in our school, one of the issues that we're facing with our students is that they don't know how to think for themselves because we've not given them that opportunity. I remember walking into my 10th grade communication class saying, all right, this is your first assignment. I thought I was cool. And I'm like, for your first 5-minute presentation, you can present on anything that you want. And they lost their minds. They're like, no, we're not doing that. There's no, I battled for a whole semester on no, just tell me what to present on. I'm like, no, on anything that you want. What do you do in the morning? Nothing. What do you do when you get home? Nothing. They couldn't think for themselves because we've programmed them into giving them options. And your paper has to be 10 pages, and it has to be this many words, and it has to be this, as opposed to giving them the opportunity to. So I would say with some scaffolding, right? So give them the opportunity to show us how they critically think by giving them some autonomy, right? What does that look like? How are you providing them the autonomy so that you can help them develop the skills to assess information that's coming at them? And I don't think we're doing that a lot in high school or in college, where they're getting the opportunity to focus on what they want to focus on. It's this idea that they have to learn A, B, and C, and that's true, but this is not easy stuff, right? It's this ability of how you do this, how do you connect with them so that they can show you how they critically think, but that they have autonomy over what they're learning. I think that will get you a little bit further. Other questions? Oh, great. I got another one here. Aren't you supposed to throw it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Here, I'll throw this one out here, and then you guys can pass it around. Ready? Okay.
How do you bridge the gap between getting people to critically think, and then at the end they all have to, or to get into college they need the SATs, or the NCLEX, or any standardized exam where you basically have to say, forget all the critical thinking, this is how you get into college?
Sure. Well, that's not as true anymore. And I'm starting to see a trend with lots of colleges getting rid of SAT scores as an admitting factor to school. What's interesting to me as a person of color thinking about this idea that all of a sudden now we're going to be using different kind of tests for different kinds of people, it frightens me a little bit. But when you think about why it's happening, it's because everyone is doing really well in the SAT test, and there's no way to differentiate it, right? There's more people there at the top, and because people are smarter and people are learning more, and so they're using different factors. And I was talking to Sue about this morning. When I talk to superintendents of schools, I say, how much do colleges pay you for doing their work? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you spend so much time testing them and giving them grades and doing all this so that a college can look at it and say, okay, this is what you do, we'll accept you. Do your own assessment, right? Figure out your own assessment. So I think that you're starting to see more schools look at different assessment models. You're starting to see more colleges look at more than just the SAT score as an admitting factor. You're starting to see more of that critical portfolio. And I think you'll start seeing more of a portfolio of stuff. And I was talking to Sue this morning about even in the business world, we have resumes, right? What's a resume? A resume is a description of your past. It's a history book. So I was talking about this concept that I'm trying to build, which is, what does a potential resume look like, right? Because that's really what I'm hiring you for, is potential. So what are you bringing colleges, what are you bringing students in for? What they've done in the past, or what their potential is, right? And so we're starting to see some shifts in that space. Yeah?
I'm ashamed, and I appreciate your inspiring talk here today. Going back to the school you founded, and a little bit of question about that was, as we try to transition from testing-based education to the competency-based, do you have any insight you can share on how your vision of your school is going to help kids transition from one mode of education to another?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we don't, for our school, we don't have a test in, we don't even look at grades from your previous school. We want to know that you're passionate about computer science, right? So that's what gets you into our school, is your passion for computer science and whatever discipline you want to pursue, right? Because I think that's the important part. You can be passionate about medicine, but still be passionate about computer science. And you can be passionate about art and still be passionate about computer science, right? So that's what we're looking for, is that passion. One of the things that we're doing from an assessment perspective is, look, we still got to do, and great high schools in this country will show you that you don't have to teach to the test. High Tech High, Brooklyn Tech, Science Leadership Academy, I can name you 10 schools right now, standing here, of schools that don't teach to the test, teach critical thinking, do assessments in a different way. Then the kids stop, they put everything down, they go take the standardized test, and they pass gloriously, and then they go back doing what they do. So you can do both at the same time. But what we're doing at our school from an assessment perspective is we're teaching them to teach. And what that means is, one of the issues that we have in computer science is that there's not a lot of computer science teachers out there in high school. You need a lot of computer science teachers. So what we came up with was, let's teach the first grade, let's spend a lot of energy and effort, really focus on that first year of students that came in, and then use their capabilities to teach the next group of students. So it waterfalls down to the next group of students. So our students are some of the assessment is based on how good they teach, on how well they teach, on how well they collaborate with others. So we're doing both at the same time. This is not an advocacy for getting rid of tests. I think tests are important. I think there's lots of ways to think about the word test, but I think you can do all those things at the same time. Yeah.
Hi, my name is James Levine. I work at Foundation Ibsen in Paris and CASE. We have a program with UNESCO promoting science in 143 countries, many of which are very, very poor. How do you realistically take these ideas you're talking about, which have a very Americanized feel, into very underserved slum-based populations? There are 3 billion people living in slums and so on. How realistically can we unfold these opportunities to underserved countries?
Yeah, no, and I'm going to give you an honest answer. It's like the world is a very big place, right? And so I'm trying to solve this problem here in the States in terms of how we educate and what does that look like. And then hopefully somebody can take some of these ideas and then think about how does that apply. I don't have a lot of international experience. I visited Africa for a month and a half. I got to visit some schools. I'll tell you one thing I did visit. This is 10 years ago. I'm talking to a principal at a school in Kenya. And he's like, what we need is a computer lab. We need more laptops. We need more computers. We just don't have any technology. And as he's saying this to me, there's like 10 kids behind him, all on their phones. Like, you have the technology, right? Like, so how do we use the technology that's available to us that's there? I think education is different at international levels. I think it's different in terms of cultural levels. I think we have to think about things differently. The one thing I'll tell you about this is that nothing that I'm saying is scalable, right? It's not, one of the things you get all the time in the ed tech business world is, how do you scale that? What does scale look like? And for me, this isn't scalable. This is cultural. This is, every organization has to think about these ideas and implement them to the best of their ability to where they are and what they do. One of the things that we built at Google, and this is mostly for K-12, and I think we're starting to build this for higher ed, is I built a transformation framework, right? What are the things you need to think about if you want to transform your school? Your vision, your mission, your culture, your professional development model, your learning models, all the different things you have to think about. It's not about one thing. So it's not technology, and the same is true across the board, right? Like, how do you look at all those different components to fit the model of what you're trying to build locally? Because it comes down to building things locally. Am I done? Yeah. Good? You can do one more. All right, one more. All right.
Yep.
Whoever's got one of the cubes.
My name's Cheryl Knight. I work in our Teaching and Learning Technologies department here. And my question revolves around kind of space design.
Yeah.
And as we're retrofitting or future-proofing some of the classrooms in some of these older buildings for our coming students and current students, what are some of the top things that you would say that we should focus on based on the incoming students and our future students?
Yeah, that space is an important element to all this, and it's funny because for those of you, how many of you work in open cube areas? All right, you know the trend now is going the other way, right? We started off with like working in offices, and then we went to open cubes, and now the trend is to go. So we go through these trends. So I think it's part of it is being able to survive all the trends that we go through, but I think more than anything is creating different spaces for different learning capacities and capabilities. As an example, I don't work in an office. I have my home office in Phoenix, and it's like not a home office like a bedroom. Like I have a structure, and the old garage is my office, right? So I have this beautiful space that's my space, and it's a brick building with hardwood floors. You can see my pictures on Instagram, and I have stuff everywhere, and it's crazy space. And my wife walks in there, and she like has a heart attack. Like she can't deal with that space. So for me, I need craziness. I need lots of stuff. I need things that I can grab. I need 4 different desks so I can sit, so I can stand, so I can do this. Where my wife would want more of a minimalist space. So I think that is like, so not make all the spaces look the same, but build different spaces. Understand that some people like to be cluttered and have things that they can grab and play with. Some people just need nothing in front of them, no distractions. So I think it's building different spaces that look different so that students can go where they're attracted to. And then you track that and you see what works and you see what people use. But more than anything, have lots of places to plug things in because we still have to plug things into the wall, right? All right, thank you guys very much.